Welcome, Legion. Today I wanted to talk to you guys about misinformation in the strength and conditioning and fitness realm. So the first thing we have to realise is that there isn't a whole lot of regulation in regards to the standards of practice, and there's no real watchdog that makes sure everyone upholds these standards of practice. So anyone can really go and get a weekend qualification and call themselves a strength and conditioning coach with very little experience. Then they can essentially start to profess different pieces of information about certain topics. Now, I think there has definitely been a paradigm shift in the sense that the quality of information that is out there there is some really good information that people give away for free. I think the tricky part is trying to find it. So the internet has been really great in regards to being able to provide these resources for everyone. The tricky part is there's now too much information, and it's really hard to know what is good and what is bad information. So for us, we've spent a lot of time siphoning through large articles of information that the internet has provided us, including some of these books behind me as well, trying to find the common themes from multiple different authors and sources of information. Now within those common themes, you can start to see a bit of a pattern, a bit of a trend. Now all of a sudden you can realise, okay, well, 10 people have said this, it's very likely that it's true. We can also go one step further to make sure that we're getting the really good information and the utmost best from our training advice. So what we like to look for is an unbiased. Everyone's going to have an opinion, including myself. I have an opinion on all sorts of different things, but realistically I try and stay as unbiased as possible. So looking at all the different resources that I have access to and trying to create an unbiased opinion, and this means this is quite challenging. This is quite challenging for a lot of people. So we try to avoid talking in absolutes because at the end of the day, no one knows 100% of something. There's always going to be the special 1% case where it was slightly different. And unfortunately, sometimes when people see that 1% case and they hear about it, they assume that it works for everyone, and vice versa, that there's 80% of cases works for everyone, when realistically it doesn't. So I think it's important to go into an article or a video they might be reading, just knowing that not everyone, and this includes me, knows everything about something. But at least we're willing to have a look at it from different angles and different perspectives. And yes, we're allowed to change our minds. New information is going to become apparent, so it's a good thing for someone to upskill themselves again and relearn something if possible. I think what I find is when we change our minds on something, it's really earth-shattering. It's this subtle shift in our thinking. That's really all it is. The principles are still there. It's just sometimes the methodology improves. Next is for it to be science and research backed. Now, this is an interesting one because sometimes the research can be a little bit behind what's happening in the field. This is actually quite common in strength and conditioning. Coaches in the trenches per se are working through different scenarios depending on their situations, and sometimes we come across things way before the research does. But a lot of the time we use the current research to guide a lot of our decisions, and really we're just adding little bits and pieces. The good thing about both communities, if we communicate well together, we can, as a coach, take some of that information that we've found in the field and give it back to someone that does prefer to do research, so they can look into it a little bit deeper for us, maybe on a bigger sample size, and then we can get some definitive answers from there. Science can also kind of capture the idea of mathematics and physics within the strength and conditioning world as well. So those principles have held pretty true for a very long time. Therefore, it still needs to hold true with strength and conditioning. If we're doing certain lifts and certain movements, there is physics acting upon the body. There's biological responses. So it's very important that us as coaches understand those different impacts and that different science behind what we do, which is really more of an art. The other thing I really back in is strong anecdotal evidence. So someone that's been doing it for a very long period of time and has had great success. So if someone has taken someone to the Olympics or trains elite athletes or trains at the level that you want to get to, that's a great resource of information because they've proven themselves. They've shown that the training that they like to do or the training that they've done with their athletes has worked. So we do the same thing here. We just look at what's worked and we go with that. There's no point always reinventing the wheel. Maybe we make little tweaks here and little upgrades, but realistically, the big foundations are what we're trying to hit. To finish up, guys, to wrap this all up, we're looking at, from our perspective, we're just trying to give you as much correct information as possible. And there might be times where we make a statement and then we later on find out a new piece of information that's going to come up, and this is going to happen forever. Then we can slightly change our position. We believe, though, we're backing in the last 100 odd years of most strength conditioning principles. We're going to follow that. And then as it becomes more practical, that's when we can kind of change it into our real life world. Thanks for that, guys. Cheers.